For something like 500 years, the Roman army was pretty much the most dominant military force on the planet. It conquered just about everything, from the misty fields of Britain all the way to the deserts of Syria. But what was their secret? Really, how did this one city-state on the Italian peninsula build a military machine that just crushed kingdoms and forged an empire? Well, to really get it, we have to start not with the Romans, but with their most terrifying enemy. You have to remember, back in the ancient world, warfare was all about honor and glory. As the historian Livy puts it, kings and commanders, they wanted greatness, and they found it in the thick of battle, leading their armies right from the front. It was a world of these epic, head-on clashes that would decide the fate of entire nations. So, what happens when all your ideas about glorious combat just smack headfirst into a brick wall? And I'm not talking about just any wall. I'm talking about the single most terrifying weapon of the age, a weapon perfected by Philip of Macedon and used by his son, Alexander the Great, to conquer the entire known world. Okay, say hello to the Macedonian phalanx. For centuries, this thing was the apex predator of the ancient battlefield. This wasn't just an army, it was a living, breathing fortress of infantry, a seemingly impenetrable wall of pikes that had literally never been beaten in a straight-up fight. The sheer physics of the phalanx is what made it so horrifying. So picture this. Each soldier is carrying a massive 21-foot pike called a sarissa. They stand 16 ranks deep, and the first 5 of those ranks could all point their pikes forward at the same time. What you get is this bristling hedge of iron that was just impossible to get through. On flat, open ground, it was basically an unstoppable force of nature. So how do you beat the unbeatable? Well, the answer comes in 168 BC at the Battle of Pydna. This was the showdown, the moment of truth. The unstoppable force of the Macedonian phalanx meets well, what exactly was the Roman legion? All right, let's break this down. The difference between these two armies was night and day. The phalanx was all about this one unified, overwhelming force with those super long pikes. The legion, though, it was built differently. It used a short sword, the gladius, and a throwing javelin, the pilum. But its real genius was its structure. Instead of being one solid block, it was made of these small, flexible units called maniples that could move all on their own. It wasn't stronger, it was smarter. And this was absolutely key. The Roman legion didn't even try to match the phalanx's power head-on. No way. Its entire goal was to get inside that wall of spears. They would absorb that first charge, break up the enemy's perfect formation, and turn a big battle of formations into what they were best at, thousands of brutal one-on-one fights. And at Pydna, that's exactly what went down. At first, the phalanx did what it always did. It just rolled forward and started pushing the Roman line back. But, and this is a huge but, the battle was fought on this hilly, uneven ground. And as that phalanx moved, tiny, fatal gaps started to open up in its rigid, perfectly aligned formation. The phalanx's greatest strength, its unity, was about to become its greatest weakness. So here's how it happened, step by step. It's really a tactical masterpiece. The phalanx pushes forward, the ground breaks its perfect cohesion, and then the Roman commander Paulus gives the order. Small cohorts of legionaries didn't run away, they charged into those little gaps. Once they were inside the spear wall, those long sarissas were useless. The Romans, with their short swords, just tore the phalanx apart from the inside out. In less than an hour, the invincible formation was completely annihilated. And the victory at Pydna tells us what Rome's true secret weapon really was. It wasn't the sword, it wasn't the shield, it was a mindset, relentless, almost shameless adaptation. If an enemy had a better weapon, or a better ship, or a better tactic, the Romans would just copy it, master it, and honestly, probably do it even better. You want a perfect example of this? Look no further than the corvus, or the crow. In their first big war against Carthage, the Romans were landlubbers. They knew nothing about sea battles. The Carthaginians, on the other hand, were master sailors. So what did Rome do? They invented this giant boarding bridge with a spike on the end that would just slam down onto an enemy ship's deck, locking the two vessels together. They completely changed the rules of the game. This relief here, it just captures their brilliant, brutal logic. They pretty much canceled out Carthage's amazing sailing skills by turning a naval battle into a land battle on floating platforms. Their legionaries would just swarm across the corvus and do what they did best. It was absolute genius, and it won them the war. But look, Roman dominance wasn't all about clever battlefield tricks or cool inventions.
It was about the software that was running the military machine, all the unseen systems that often won them wars before a single sword was even drawn.
These were the real foundations of their victory. The discipline was, well, it was insane. Draconian is the word for it. A soldier on campaign had basically no legal rights. The logistics were ruthlessly efficient, making sure armies were always supplied. And the engineering was just on another level. But that last point, that might be the most incredible part. They built a fully fortified camp at the end of every single day's march.
Just think about that for a second. It doesn't matter how deep in hostile territory they were, the Roman army never, ever slept in the open. Every single night, they were protected inside what was basically a brand new fortified town, with walls and ditches and the whole shebang. This relief from Trajan's column shows you that their shovels and pickaxes were every bit as important to conquest as their swords.
Okay, so we've seen how the Romans won, but that brings us to an even more fundamental question. Why? Why did they fight so relentlessly? What was the engine driving this centuries-long project of constant conquest?
The answer is actually pretty simple. War was profitable. Big time. For a general, a successful campaign meant personal glory, which translated directly into political power back in Rome. It also meant unbelievable wealth from plunder and, most importantly, a constant river of enslaved people to work the fields and mines, which fueled the entire Roman economy.
This brutal reality is what fueled everything. For Rome, war wasn't a last resort. It wasn't just foreign policy. It was the single most profitable business in their world, and the entire structure of their society was geared toward doing it again and again.
Let's just bring this back to the Battle of Pydna for a second. The victory was total. So what happened next? The conquering Roman army marched through the nearby region of Ypres, plundered its cities, and enslaved 150,000 people. That one campaign flooded the slave markets and made the commanders and the state fabulously wealthy. That was the dividend of victory.
So, when you put all of these pieces together, the tactical flexibility, the relentless adaptation, the iron discipline, the engineering genius, and the brutal economic incentives, you get a machine designed for just one purpose: conquest. And this was the result. This map. This shows the world that machine built. A single political entity stretching from Scotland all the way to Iraq, bound together by Roman roads, Roman law, and, of course, the ever-present threat of the legions. They didn't just win battles, they remade the world in their own image. But what was the true nature of that Roman peace, the famous Pax Romana? Well, the Roman historian Tacitus, quoting a British chieftain, offers a really chilling perspective. He says of the Romans, they create a desolation and call it peace. It's a haunting thought, isn't it? It forces us to ask, was the unstoppable Roman army a force for civilization, or was it just the most successful protection racket in history?